Hi everyone, Krzysztof the Polish Geek, and welcome to another video. And I just gotta talk about the last announcement from the PlayStation State of Play, which is the God of War news. And I have to say, well, I see a lot of people being very hyped and very excited, actually most probably. I'm actually not one of them. I'm actually pretty disappointed with the announcement. Like, why do we need a remake of the original trilogy? An original trilogy is perfect as this and it doesn't need a remake. I was really counting that they're gonna actually announce a new game in the series. I mean, you could say Sons of Sparta is technically a new game, and we'll get to it soon because the first thing they're gonna focus, I was actually hoping for a next game in the mainline series. Maybe God of War Egypt, or I guess God of War in another world mythology. I mean, there's so many excellent mythologies that Kratos could actually visit. Now, reason again I'm going with Egypt is because that seems like most likely an accepted choice with plenty of allusions and all to Egyptian mythology. That's why I'm betting on Egypt, even though as a God of War fan I'm actually on board with any mythology they would choose, but again, Egypt seems more likely. And also quite interesting that I pretty recently made an opinion piece video on how God of War series should actually end, but again, this announcement of the remake of the original trilogy, again, I see almost everybody being very hyped up about, but I'm not. Because again, like, why do we need a remake? The original trilogy, again, is as perfect as it is, and it absolutely doesn't need a remake. I mean, a remaster for modern consoles, yeah, I could get behind that. And again, the only way you can sell me on a remake is as long as it's still pretty much completely the same story down to every detail and even every conversation and dialogue. I guess with the only change being the graphical enhancements, kind of like Spyro Reignited Trilogy as well as Super Mario RPG, which are practically unchanged from their original versions, although the graphics are basically built from scratch. So if that is what they're trying to do with the original God of War trilogy, like everything is still completely the same, just the graphics built from scratch and looking entirely new, then yes, I could totally get on board with that. But I'm afraid sadly that's not what we are getting. Like another thing that makes me really frustrated is that it's probably the worst time to ever do a remake, because we all know we live in the modern world, and so the worst case scenario, and sadly the most likely one actually, but the most likely scenario, which is also the worst case scenario, is that we are gonna get basically a story remade for modern audiences with Kratos being much more of a softy, which would very much kill his character development completely in the Norse games, because actually how horrible and evil Kratos was in the original games is actually what makes his character development in the Norse saga so special, actually. But yes, in the most likely and also worst case scenario, we are gonna get a much softer version of Kratos combined with race swapping of some of the gods, sadly. Yep. Which is actually the main reason I'm so against this remake of the original trilogy. And even if, thankfully that's not what happens, even if the people who are remaking the original trilogy are fans of the original games and will try to make it similar, I still think, why do we need this? Again, original trilogy is perfect as it is. Granted, you could make an argument that I'm the type of a guy that can just play an old PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2 game and have an amazing time, because yeah, I really love old PlayStation 2, Super Nintendo games. I really love old games, but a lot of modern gamers admittedly do not. But again, in that case, what this remake of the original God of War trilogy should really be is the first three original games, I guess, in one package, but without a single change made, and just with modern, very realistic looking graphics. Like basically, again, graphics built from scratch, but without a single change from the story or even a dialogue. That's what it should be, because again, I think the dialogue and the story and everything in the old games is perfect. I mean, you can make an argument that Kratos is practically a sadistic bastard, especially in God of War 3, but again, that's kind of the point actually. the fact that Kratos was such a sadistic bastard is actually what again makes his character development in Norse God of War so special. And again, when I was watching it, I was really, and I mean really counting that we are gonna actually get a new game in this series, but that shows that we are unlikely to be getting a new game in this series anytime soon, which is such a shame. I mean, I've seen someone saying that they hope that they would rather take their time with the new game in the series and make it amazing than just rush it. Well, yeah, I'm all for that, but at the same time, the fact that we are getting a remake of the original trilogy makes me suspect that maybe they actually weren't working on the new game in the series at all. But yes, most people are very, very excited for this original trilogy remake news, but me, not so much. First again, I'm very much afraid they're gonna remake it for the modern audiences, which is a complete no for me. And even if that's not the case, then I still think the original trilogy is as perfect as it is, and I would rather them just be focusing on the next mainline game in the series, like new mythology, like continue the adventures of Kratos and Atreus, and hopefully also end the series how I very much said they should end it in the opinion piece series of Kratos becoming one of the three wise men. But whatever, as things happen, we are getting a remake of the original trilogy. So the only thing we can do now is hope that, again, that it's practically a complete recreation of the first three games, just again with modern realistic looking graphics, because really that's the only thing that you can make an argument should be changed about first two games in the series, because the graphics in God of War 3 are still perfect and probably better than graphics in most modern video games anyway. But yes, like if the remake is just new realistic looking graphics but completely the same story with every detail, then I'm okay with that, even if I still wish they were instead focusing on making the next mainline game in the series. But if they are making even a single change to the story, like take a look at Resident Evil 4, like, well, the story is the same, there are some individual changes which I actually think were for the worse actually with Resident Evil 4 Remake, because I think that the original Resident Evil 4 is actually much better than the remake, because yeah, it's, I know it's practically the same story, but I actually think the changes they made to the story were actually very much for the worse, actually. But I'm hoping that maybe that's not the case with God of War. Maybe, again, the only change they're gonna make is just new, realistic, entirely new graphics built from scratch, and that's it, actually. Because, again, the story especially is as perfect as this, and I don't want them to make a single change, even though, again, that's most likely what's gonna happen. Like, obviously, they're gonna likely remake it for modern audiences, which for me is an absolute breaker. No, no, and no again for me. We'll see what happens. And now let's also briefly talk about the new Metroidvania God of War game, Sons of Sparta, about young Kratos and his brother Deimos, how they're training to be Spartans. And that actually seems quite interesting, and I'm totally getting it actually, especially that it's already out digitally, so yeah, I'm likely getting it and will do my best effort to actually review it for you folks when I finish it. But yes, God of War, Sons of Sparta, the adventures of young Kratos and his brother Deimos, yeah, that I'm completely on board with, actually. And I'll be glad to play it, actually. But here are my thoughts on the new God of War Trilogy remake. Like, again, most people seem very hyped and really excited for it. But I guess I'm in the minority, but I'm not. Like, worst case scenario, and most likely one, they will remake it for the modern audiences. Best case scenario is that it's gonna be just an original trilogy once again, down to every detail, just with, again, modern realistic looking graphics without a single change, and that I could be all for, except that, again, I still very much wish they instead focus on just making new game in the mainline series and actually continue the adventures of Kratos and Atreus. That's what I personally really want for them. Oh, and visit new mythology. But whatever, as things stand, we are getting a remake of the original trilogy, so the best thing we can do now is hope that it's actually gonna be faithful recreation of the original games rather than remaking it for the modern audiences. But in the modern world, just hard to hope for anything good nowadays. So yeah, but instead I'm soon starting to play God of War Sons of Sparta, and thank you all of you for checking out this video. Press the like button, please subscribe to this channel. What do you think about the recent God of War Original Trilogy remake announcement? Let me know, and talk to you soon. Bye!